What was the most scared that you ever were in battle?
Um, I was terrified. There's a moment in the book. So the book is 85,000 words long. I gave to them even as far back as when I first got my agent and I first approached the book company Orion that published, like 125,000 words, and I wasn't even done. Like, I wanted a lot more out there, and they were like, no, no, no. Books that sell at the moment, the person the people are going to buy this book, they want it short, they want it punchy. Some of your chapters are 7,000 words long. We want them to be around 3,000 words long, and so they cut deep. So very much, I had to choose moments in the 3 years that I was there, which is crazy. And I had to really give tasters about what it felt like to be there. And then only being allowed to have a chapter or two to really explore things in depth as you get towards the end. For example, there's an engagement, which is actually quite a defining engagement for me in Syria and in Raqqa, towards the end of the book, where people die and I'm exposed to the rawness of fighting. But I was allowed a couple of chapters to truly explore that. But there were other times where I wasn't allowed to explore it and I wasn't allowed to develop it, which is a shame because you miss out so much. There's still a healthy amount of fighting and exploring character and who was I with. But there are so many people that I can think of now when I look back on my time in Syria, which didn't quite make the cut in the book. But one of the things that did make the cut was this moment when we were assaulting a village just outside of Til Nasri. Just as I described a little earlier, when you're out in the middle of a field being shot at, it's not a good feeling. It was at the middle of the night. We were sent on this operation to attack this village. And there were about 30 of us or 40 of us. There was 2 tanks sent along with us. And we went out into sort of no man's land between these 2 positions. We walked through this ruined group of buildings, which wasn't particularly scary. But it was only when we got out into the middle of the field did I become incredibly exposed. There was, at this one time, we were going through this field, and it was just a joke. A tank came up behind us with its headlights on and illuminated us, and we were literally 200 meters away from the village. And I was like, if they open up now, like 20, 30 people are going to die in this field. And what's incredible is they didn't shoot at all. And I have no explanation why. They didn't shoot at all until we got within 20 or 30 meters. I'll tell you that in a second. I felt a little moderately more comfortable as the headlights swung off us and the tanks parked in front of us, and I was able to hide behind one of the tanks. And then bang, they softened the position up a little bit with the tanks, and we were just told to charge. We charged maybe about 30 meters until we all dived into a ditch. And I can remember looking to my left and seeing 20 or 30 people all the way down the ditch, all looking out at the ISIS position, actually very much like a First World War trench. And this tank, a homemade tank, was coming along. And I don't speak Arabic, I don't speak Kurdish, sorry. I don't know what's really going on. You're constantly looking at what other people are doing, and then it's quite clear that they want this tank to go first. It comes and gets stuck in the ditch. It literally falls into the ditch, and because it's a homemade tank, can't get out again. So we're waiting for maybe only about 5 minutes, and this guy eventually reverses, tries again, and manages to get through the ditch, and it starts charging headlong towards the village. And I didn't know what to do. I could see other Kurds jumping out of the ditch and running towards the village. So I just looked ahead and I could see a piece of farm machinery, which I just ran straight towards. People were following me now, and I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Excuse my language, you can edit that. And I dived behind this thing, and I watched as this tank went straight through this wall into a compound. So there's an explosion of dust, and there were some fires in the village. The only real light was from the stars and from the odd fire in the village where the tanks had hit them. And there was no firing. It was quiet as hell. And we'd crossed 400 meters of open ground. We just smashed through a hole in the wall of one of their compounds, and ISIS had done nothing. And after this tank reversed out of the compound, I thought to myself, well, there's my entry. I've got to go in there. So I left this position of relative safety and I ran towards this entrance, only for the tank to change its mind and go back into the compound. Maybe it saw a bit of wall that hadn't collapsed or something. So it went back in. So I'm standing in the middle people had then followed me, about maybe 10 people had followed me, and we were in the middle of the ground. And as the tank came out again, it may have been just a few seconds, but to me at the time, in my memories, it was like a few minutes. I can remember looking at the tank and seeing sparks and flashes all over the tank and looking at it, and then realizing that the air around me was being manipulated, that there was this terrible noise, pum, 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 and it was all around me. And I realized that ISIS was shooting it mostly at the tank. There was probably the odd bullet coming my way as well, but some of the Kurds around me had opened up with their machine guns and with their AKs and the heavy machine guns, etc. And I immediately engaged as well, and I started firing. And you don't know, sometimes in the darkness, you can see flashes of what may be our fire hitting the corner of a building or hitting the wall or something, and you don't know whether is that from us or is that the flash of an AK firing back at me. So you're confused, and I was firing up these positions, and then I realized that that there was fire coming very close to me, that I could hear bullets cracking over my head. So I immediately dived onto my belly because there was nowhere to go. The tank was sort of in the way, and there was a lot of fire coming. And we started getting shot at, and you're firing back from the ground. And I can remember at one point I had to roll away because a Kurdish guy was behind me with a heavy machine gun on its tripod, right behind me, firing. But his weapon was behind me, and it was like his bullets were coming past my head, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, like there's people around me who could accidentally shoot me in the darkness here. I got to pull back a little bit, and I've got to roll away from them because he was spitting a huge amount of flashes of lights at the front of his weapon. And it reminded me how exposed we were. So I sort of crawled back behind him and then began to roll until I could find some sort of indentation in the ground. And I found nothing until about maybe 10 meters of rolling, until I got to a road that I could feel the tarmac about that much, but that was just enough for me to start firing just from the ground. And no one moved. I was waiting. I thought to myself, am I in charge here? Like, should I be doing something? Should I stand up and charge the position and try and get into cover over there and then toss a grenade through a hole? And then I even at one point looked back, where can I run back to? And I could see a ruined house, maybe 100 yards behind. And we were firing, but and no one was in control. And I didn't know if we should be moving forward or moving back, whether I should be going back to my last position. But then the fire became so intolerable. The amount of ISIS fire, I could hear it hitting the concrete of the road next to me. I could hear it hitting the ground. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the worst place that I could possibly be. Like, confused, not sure where to go, whether to go forward, to go back, and completely in the open. And I was terrified. I won't lie, I was absolutely terrified. And to cut a long story short, they ordered a retreat, and a commander finally came to our small group that was in the open, and he sort of crawled up to us, slapped people on the leg, ordered them to run, and I was actually the last one to go. So I allowed everyone else to go, and I fired the odd sort of shots at ISIS, but mostly I was just thinking to myself, I'm going to wait for them to tell me to go. Which, and this was something that would happen a lot over the years, is sometimes I'd say to myself, God damn it, like a commander will literally tell me, run across that road, and I would do it. And only afterwards I think to myself, why do I do this sort of thing? This is so foolhardy. And he told me to run, and I can remember just scarpering back to running like my life depended on it, which it did, back to this ruined village and eventually over the berm. And I can remember one thing, I don't think I wrote this in the book, I remember as I got to the top of the berm, it was slippy, and I slipped on the top of the berm, and I went boom and landed on top of the berm, and then crawled over and staggered down. And there's nothing more humiliating as to go, I thought, in a poetic sense, and it was really, we climb out of our positions, we go towards the enemy, we engage them, and then are forced to retreat. And as we're retreating, their 50 cals, their heavy machine guns start opening up, and also they start jeering us. We can hear shouts in Arabic behind us as we're scarpering back to the village, and there's dozens of people going back. And I thought to myself, that is the crowning thing on top of a humiliating operation there, where I face plant into the ground and I stagger over. And actually, there's a little lack of control. People keep going, retreating. They retreat past our position, and there's actually Kurdish commanders saying, "Go back," sort of thing. Hold our position, like we've just left your position. And tabors had been mixed up slightly, so I'd lost people. And I can remember just settling down in this position, and I stayed up for about maybe 5 more hours until about 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and finally I was relieved from guard duty, and I was allowed to go get some sleep. But that was no one died. I didn't see anyone fall, and I didn't hold anyone when they died. I've been in worse scenarios since, really, but that one sticks in my mind because it happened quite early on. It was in 2015, my first trip, and it was a moment of intense vulnerability where I'm happy to risk my life if I know where I'm going. Like if I'm in cover and I'm being shot at, my fearometer is pretty damn high. But when you're out of control of your own life and you're lying in a field waiting for someone to eventually get their bead on you and shoot you in the head, it's not a pleasant feeling. You've lost control, and that feeling of lost control is terrible. It's where fear comes from, really.
You can click here to watch the full interview, or you can listen to it on all the major podcasting platforms. The links are down below, or you can just search for Ideas Sleep Furiously. Thank you.